What makes a great professional wrestler? You gotta have it all to succeed in wrestling, especially these days. Not only do you need the skill, the look, the vocals, and the charisma, you also need a little bit of luck. And sometimes, you find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's all it takes to derail a promising career. But this video is the story of a woman who didn't let herself get derailed. Ty Conti has burst onto the scene in the last few months and has come out of absolutely nowhere. This video is about why Ty Conti works and why a little change in philosophy is all you need to become a star. We understand professional wrestling in very general terms. Babyfaces are good guys, heels are bad guys, babyfaces play clean, heels cheat, heels get the heat, babyfaces make the comeback. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, then you'll remember a couple weeks ago, we made a video criticizing Cody Rhodes for not following this style of booking. But here's the thing, wrestling needs nuance. The dynamic I described can deliver you some of the best matches in history. You can check out our website, ProWrestlingMusings.com, right now to see statistical breakdowns of some of those matches. But if you have that and only that for a 2-hour television program, it becomes stale pretty quickly. So this is where it's time to add some flavor to our wrestling. We bring in the monster heel, so big he doesn't even need to cheat. We bring in the anti-hero, a bad guy with good intentions. This gives us flavor to spice up our general good guy versus bad guy dynamic. But there is one gimmick in the world of wrestling that is so difficult, so exclusive, so elusive, that the vast majority of professional wrestlers never even try to make it work. The shoot fighter. In the world of kayfabe, wrestlers are the baddest, most dangerous people on the planet. They look like walking mountains with more muscle in one finger than I have in my whole body. They perform jaw-dropping feats of athleticism. They get their heads driven into the ground over and over and over again, and they keep getting up. Wrestlers in the world of kayfabe are basically superheroes. Of course, when we go outside the world of kayfabe, we know wrestlers are, in reality, super athletes who work together to achieve stunning displays of physical prowess, like a violent ballet. We're all willing to suspend our disbelief, a literary term meaning that you don't question everything you see in fiction to the nth degree. It's why even wacky gimmicks like being a millionaire or being a very small bald man who kinda looks like that other guy have gotten over in the past. But outside the world of wrestling, the rest of combat sports are, as we know, a shoot. MMA, amateur wrestling, Olympic judo, etc., they don't feature two athletes working together. They feature two athletes beating the tar out of each other until one of them is unconscious. Now, we as wrestling fans know that wrestling is a work and these other sports are shoots, so we can watch both and enjoy both for very different reasons. I know I do. But when you mix the two, that's where we start to have a problem. See, in the world of kayfabe, wrestlers are already superheroes, as I said. So when you stick in someone from a shoot sport, while that may be very impressive in real life, in the world of kayfabe, there is literally no difference between MMA and wrestling. There are two combat sports that look different, but are both real. So if you come in and your gimmick is shoot fighter, in the kayfabe world of wrestling that assumes wrestling is a shoot, your gimmick just becomes person. And we see this work in real time when you take famous shoot fighters who made the transition over to wrestling. Dan Severn crashed and burned multiple places because he didn't have a character. Ken Shamrock had a moment of fame in the WWF, but he couldn't reach the lofty heights of the World Championship picture. Cain Velasquez came in to challenge Brock Lesnar, and he even had a little run in AAA that people were really impressed by. He found himself walking after less than a year. Even Ronda Rousey drew criticism from fans before she learned how to cut a promo. Antonio Inoki's obsession with shoot fighters turned wrestlers nearly destroyed New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, there is of course an obvious exception here, Brock Lesnar. When Brock returned from the UFC, he didn't have to do anything to get over. The key with Brock is everyone could see his jaw-dropping athleticism. His accomplishments around the world of sports spoke for themselves. So in kayfabe, Brock Lesnar's gimmick was, well, Brock Lesnar. He had an aura that everyone respected, and wrestlers sold the hell out of that. All of that finally brings us to Ty Conti. Conti began her athletic career in martial arts, earning a black belt in judo and a blue belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She even participated in trials for the Brazilian Olympic judo team prior to the 2016 Rio Games. When she arrived in NXT, she dressed as your run-of-the-mill judoka, gi and all. She was green in the ring, of course, but certainly the talent was there. Unfortunately for Ty, you could say that about basically everyone in NXT. The question in a roster with as much talent as WWE has is who is going to make a lasting impression? Ty, unfortunately, didn't. Why? Well, because of what I just said. Shoot fighter is a notoriously difficult gimmick to pull off, and usually it doesn't work. But there's another wrinkle here. Remember how I said earlier that we need some variety in our wrestling matches, and you can't just have babyface being killed, comeback finish every match? Well, NXT, at the time Ty Conti was there, didn't get that memo. So as Ty was still trying to figure herself out in the ring, she was forced to wrestle a very particular style. She was forced to take the brunt of the offense from any heel she faced. Now, when your gimmick is badass shooter, but you're getting your ass handed to you all match, it's hard to get anyone to care. Combine that with the fact that she was still working on her promo skills and her gimmick, again, is incredibly difficult to pull off, and you've got a pretty much unwinnable battle. And full disclosure here, I've actually been a fan of Ty Conti since 2018 for precisely the reasons I'm about to get to. All Ty needed while struggling through WWE developmental was a change of scenery so she could try something new. And boy, did she get it. Conti got her release from WWE in April of 2020 as part of their COVID-19 cutbacks. She signed with AEW once her no-compete was up and began working with AEW's on-site trainers in the Nightmare Factory. When Conti first appeared in AEW, she competed in the Deadly Draw, the first ever AEW women's tag team tournament. Fans had pretty mixed feelings, if they had any at all, when she first showed up. At the time, Conti was known more for her modeling than her wrestling. She even acknowledged as much, famously stating in a Twitter video,
"I do know I have an amazing body, and I also know that I have been working so fucking hard since I am 7 years old."
This tweet here was a reply to that video. It didn't age that well. Fast forward 8 months, Ty Conti is number 1 in the women's power rankings, teaming with the women's world champion on Dynamite and earning plaudits from wrestling fans and commentators all over the world. In an AEW women's division that has been infamously lacking in its prominence, Ty Conti has broken through to be one of the fastest rising stars in the company. How the hell did she do it? Well, let's go back once again to her issues in WWE that I talked about. You can't have a badass shoot fighter gimmick if you're getting your ass kicked all match. So AEW does something quite simple. They treat Ty Conti like a badass. Here's what I mean. Being a badass doesn't necessarily have to mean dominant. In wrestling, dominance is reserved for monsters usually, so because of that suspension of disbelief I talked about earlier, fans are willing to buy into a badass hero even if they're not mowing down all their enemies without breaking a sweat like we would expect, say, a badass video game character to. Take Steve Austin, for example, maybe the baddest badass in history. Stone Cold still gave a lot to his opponents in his matches, but it was always believable, and it served a greater purpose, as anyone who was allowed to get offense in on Austin must be a big deal, right? So in Conti's case, she doesn't dominate her matches like a monster, but she does have an overall advantage offensively when you look at our offense for and against numbers. You can follow along with me over on ProWrestlingMusings.com. Conti's plus 39 differential implies control without dominance, exactly what you'd expect from an expert fighter. Conti also excels at pretty much everything. Of course, in real life, she's a naturally gifted athlete, so this is no surprise. But in the kayfabe squared circle, we can see that she really has no weaknesses. She's a terrific pinpoint striker, and she adds a 14% strikedown percentage, meaning 1 out of every 8 strikes she lands will knock you down. Pretty impressive when you consider the current champion, Hikaru Shida, has a 19% strikedown rate. She's ranked 6th in grappling and 3rd in submission seconds on our rankings chart, so no weaknesses there. She averages almost a pin attempt a minute, often using some innovative pinning combination, which the announcers always sell as her superior in-ring acumen. If you take a look at our styles chart, you'll see that Conti is probably the most balanced wrestler in AEW and is as good a technical wrestler as exists in the company. So imagine this. I'm a pundit behind the desk at a UFC event preview show. I say, Ty Conti is a balanced wrestler with no weaknesses. She controls her matches, she puts constant pressure on her opponents, and she wrestles at a high sustained pace. What did that sound like? It sounded like I was describing a mixed martial artist. And that is the brilliance of Ty Conti. You see, Ty actually has a character. Ty Conti is a person. She's charismatic, funny, intense, and fiercely loyal. We know who Ty Conti is, and we know how Ty Conti wrestles. She doesn't have a shoot fighter gimmick, she just is a shoot style wrestler. Her shoot judoka background is why she's so good in kayfabe. Her 9-2 record will speak to that. But that's not who she is. What Ty Conti and AEW have done is lay out a blueprint as detailed as a junior Lego manual, something that even I could follow along with, for how to make a shoot fighter gimmick work. So let's go back to Brock Lesnar, the most famous shoot fighter in the history of wrestling. Is his gimmick Brock Lesnar, the former UFC heavyweight champion? No. His gimmick, if you want to call it that, is just being Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar happens to be a world-famous shoot fighter and the former baddest man on the planet. But Brock Lesnar is just Brock Lesnar. He wrestles like Brock Lesnar. And Brock Lesnar is a former UFC fighter. Ken Shamrock was Ken Shamrock, the original UFC superstar, but he just wrestled like a normal guy. Brock Lesnar is a shooter with no gimmick. Ken Shamrock was a nothing with a shooter gimmick. You see what I'm saying? It sounds like a distinction without a difference, but it's not. It's the difference between a shoot fighter gimmick never getting over and a person who happens to be a shoot fighter becoming one of the biggest stars on the planet. Am I saying Ty Conti will turn into a Brock Lesnar level star? Hell if I know. She's only 25, so anything can happen. But what I am saying is Ty Conti and AEW figured it out. Ty Conti works because she wrestles like a shooter, but she as a person is a person. I feel like I could talk to Ty Conti on the street and I would know what she's about, how she is, what she's like. But I also know that if I look at her wrong, she could snap me in half like a toothpick. That's the essence of a wrestling character. The Rock was just The Rock. Ric Flair was just Ric Flair. Stone Cold was just Stone Cold. You can call these gimmicks, but they're more than that. They're characters. They walk, talk, and act like real people. Wrestling trainers are fond of saying the best characters are just your natural personality turned up to Spinal Tap 11. So who's to say if Ty Conti will reach the lofty heights she seems to be on track for? Here's what I do know. Ty Conti turned herself from a middling trainee fighting for TV time to one of the most compelling and fastest rising stars in the world's fastest rising promotion. Whatever she and AEW did, they did something right, and everyone should be taking notes.